Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to be in front of the board this evening to present the item on the agenda to talk about comprehensive plan and school performance profile. I'm going to start first with doing a review of our 2013-14 academic achievement data. And I'm going to start first in the presentation with the way it used to be and just presenting the good old, here it is, proficient and advanced performance of our various grade levels across the district. And then I'll point to some things for you to look at in the presentation that then will segue into the school performance profile for the 13-14. The information is not public in terms of it being accessible by the public on the interactive website that we had exposure to last year with 2012 and 2013 data. Unfortunately, I do not have a timeline to report to the board of when that public release will occur. The last communication might have been, Dr. Ruth, 2 weeks ago, perhaps. So September 25th was the original date, and now it's just an indefinite date for that. In the past, I've taken you into the school performance site. I'm not going to do that this evening. Instead, I'll be pulling out the pieces of data to take a look at, and also be mindful on a lot of these slides or pure data that's on these slides, and that rather than read that data to you, instead just point out some things to look at. Likewise, we do plan on making this presentation accessible to the public then following tonight's meeting. So, and then after school performance profile, then we'll take a look at a quick summary of the recommendation before you this evening in the approval of the 2014 to 2017 comprehensive plan. So real quick, a couple pieces to throw up there. PS is just reporting academic achievement, proficient and advanced across our district. I will say that you will see a trend throughout the performance that we continue to have very strong achievement data in our various tested areas. One of the areas that you will see that's new to us and is a challenge for us to really understand ourselves as well as to communicate to the public is where the growth comes into the school performance profile. But removing growth and just looking at proficient and advanced, this is what our grades 3, 4, and 5 look like across the district. So this is our entire grade population and compared to the state. Here again in math, 6, 7, and 8 compared to the state. You will also see in almost every data point significant performance well above what the state performance was for the last year. So that's our grades 6, 7, and 8 reading at our middle schools. For math, this is what our proficient and advanced performance was in our elementary schools. One item to point out to you in red is we have a very strong advanced performance. If you think about, we have 4 performance categories in PSSA: advanced, proficient, basic, and below basic. So if you take a look at the state average of proficient and advanced, just look at our one performance category of advanced and how that performs relative to the state in both proficient and advanced. So it's something to keep in mind as a tickler for information later to come in terms of how strong our advanced performance is in some of our content areas just under achievement. So grades 3 through 5 and how they match up to the state. And then in our middle schools, here too, very strong advanced performance. 71% in 2 grade levels and 68 in another that were advanced. And then the rest of it made up of 89, 87, and 90 in grades 6, 7, and 8. Science, again, strong performance. If you look at grade 4 is the first year that's tested in science. In our elementary schools, it is the only grade that has the science exam. So it's grade 4 in elementary schools, and then grade 8 in our middle schools, and then we have the Keystone Biology in high school. And that's an important piece to keep in mind when we think about in our elementary schools, reading and math is grades 3, 4, and 5, cumulative in school performance profile score. Grade 4 is a single subject, single grade tested area, and what that weight is in the school performance profile. And again, looking at the strong advanced performance in grade 4 science. Writing, This is an interesting piece. What I showed you earlier, looking at the advanced performance in math and science, there's an interesting piece here. When you look at our advanced performance in writing in grades 5 and 8, you might say, well, what's there to brag about there? That's only 10% or 12%. Well, across the state, it's less than 10% advanced. I don't have an answer for you on that. It's just, to me, every time I look at the data, I get more questions. And so it's interesting to see what advanced performance looks like across the state and within our school district relative to the PSSA writing in grades 5 and grade 8. And you also see it in our literature. This is what our Algebra 1 Keystone. So we have Keystone exams. We have 3 of them. Algebra 1, we have literature, and we have biology. So Algebra 1 is tested in students as early as grade 7 for our accelerated students, then grade 8 for the majority of our students, and then we do have some students that come to our high school that were not on a math track to have completed Algebra 1 by the end of 8th grade, so they come into 9th grade taking Algebra 1. And so what you see is what our grade 7 student population has done in Algebra 1 in the Keystone, our grade 8 population. And then you see a low number there in grade 9 through 11, but keep in mind these are students that are coming in that are struggling learners in math, in algebra, and you can see what that looks like across the state of Pennsylvania as well. And so many cases, the grade 9 through 11 student is students that may be taking Algebra 1 for the first time as a different sequence, or some students that are struggling to pass the test and are taking it multiple times through the retesting process that is in place for Keystones. PSSA, students only take it once. Keystone, students may take it in multiple attempts up to their 11th grade year. Literature. So the majority of our students take literature for the Keystone exam in grade 10, and this is what their performance looks like relative to the state. And then grade 11, and these students are students that are retesting. Now you'll see these numbers, and when you get into the school performance profile, you might, well, those are different numbers that are on the school performance profile. Yes, because the numbers that are reported on a high school's SPP are the best scores of the students after their last attempt by the end of their junior year. So you see the cumulative effect of students at anywhere from grade 7 up through 11 and taking the test more than once, what their best score is by the end of their junior year. That's when it counts. The only students that are getting attributed to the high school score are students that have completed their junior year. All their students that take the Keystone exam prior get their scores banked until they finish their junior year. And then this was biology that we test at grade 11 in our Physics First science sequence. And again, you'll see that number looking different on our school performance profile. So going to school performance profile, we've talked about this a number of different times. We had the opportunity to see the preview last year. Just want to do a quick reminder that when you see that number is on a 0 to 100 point percentage scale. I will show you in a second the elementary, middle, and high school have different total possible points that then the earned points get divided by the possible points to derive to a percentage. So when you see that number, in the past we would have reported academic achievement, how schools did or district did, just based on proficient and advanced percentage. And you would see that number represented as 0 to 100. Same thing in school performance profile, 0 to 100%. Okay? But the total possible points for each of the schools is not 100. It's less than 100. So the main 5 areas within the school performance profile, again as a reminder, academic achievement, that's proficient and advanced on the PSSAs and the Keystones. The Closing the Achievement Gap is a piece that was for science only this year, and I'll show you that in a little bit of what that looks like, and that's working with closing the achievement gap for all students and for historically underperforming students. Academic growth referred to PVAS, the acronym, the Pennsylvania Value Added Assessment System, in terms of looking at all students, not just students that are basic or below basic and what we're doing to move them into proficiency, but what are we doing to move our proficient students to greater levels of achievement? What are we doing to move our advanced students to keep them moving to greater levels of performance? And so there's a whole growth model now that becomes a significant weighted factor within our school performance profile. And then there's a piece called other academic indicators. In the elementary and middle school, it's promotion rate and attendance rate. And in the high school, it's made up of graduation rate, attendance rate, as well as some other factors I'll share with you shortly. And then there is extra credit. So each school building has a potential amount of points for extra credit that's given to schools based on advanced student performance. So keep in mind earlier when I showed you some slides of significant advanced performance that weighed significantly in terms of some extra credit that our schools received on their school performance profile. So looking at elementary and middle, thinking about the 100% scale, this is the actual possible points for both our elementary schools and our middle schools. And it varies, and this is what's tough in making comparisons across districts, is because each district has its own grade level configuration. Not every elementary school is K through 5. Not every middle school is 6, 7, 8. And so when you call your school a middle school, it's not the same. If I use Governor Mifflin as an example, their middle school is 7, 8. You have other elementaries that might just be K to 3 or K to 4. So when we start using that school performance profile to do the comparisons that is a feature, we have to be mindful that every building's total possible points is going to look different based on what grades they have in their building that are tested. So for our elementary schools and for our middle schools, the total possible points that we have is 92.5. Those total possible points, you see the breakdown there. Academic achievement, as we said earlier, that used to be everything, is now only 40 points out of the 92.5. Growth is now equal to the weighting of achievement at 40 points equally. And then there's closing the achievement gap that for this year is only 2.5 because it's science only, not math and reading. And then the academic indicators are 10, and then each of the elementary schools and middle schools could earn up to 4 possible extra credit points. So I want to show this to you a little bit differently. So of the 92.5 points, so earlier I showed you this. These were the larger categories. Now take a look very specifically at the content areas and the tests that make up these weightings for our elementary schools. So the most heavily weighted tested subject in the school performance profile for our elementary schools is reading. Significant in there is grade 3 reading. Grade 3 reading counts twice. It counts within the overall academic achievement for reading, but it's also pulled out as a separate piece for 10 points on its own. And that's meant to communicate the relative importance that the state has put on grade 3 students reading at grade level by the end of grade 3, according to the PSSA assessment. Then you see the breakdown for science, math, writing, and other. Now, I said earlier that grade 3 reading was pulled out, and there was purpose behind the different weightings in the subjects to communicate the importance. But an unintended consequence, if you want to call it, for the 13-14 year is that for closing the achievement gap, the state had communicated with us last fall that 12-13 would serve as the baseline for reading, math, and science and writing for closing the achievement gap. And so then we were given what our performance expectations were for 13-14 to get full credit for closing that gap. On September 18th, we received a communication saying that they were not going to do math, reading, and writing because the assessments were going to be all new this year. Therefore, the 14-15 school year would serve as the baseline year, and we would not see the closing the achievement gap reporting until the 15-16 year. What happened as a result of that is it now made science the second heaviest weighted test subject. Because if you add science as a closing the achievement gap piece at 2.5 to the other points in it, it now became 20 points. Also keep in mind that in our elementary schools and our middle school, when you look at reading, it's 3 grade levels combined, math 3 grade levels combined, science single grade tested subject at a significant weight relative to the other tests. So here are our school performance profile scores for the elementary school for the 13-14 academic year. The color coding represents whether it was an increase or a decrease from the year prior. So you see going down through the list alphabetically what our schools performed. The expectation from the state of Pennsylvania is 70 or better. And so you can see that our schools still are performing very well above expectations. And you'll see that 2 of our schools have increased their performance from the year prior. And I'll get to breaking out some of those numbers a little bit later. In looking at middle school, what has happened, again, using that closing the achievement gap piece, what has happened when you look at the total possible points, science has now become the single most heavily weighted test relative to the other subjects. So, and again, keep in mind that because our middle school are 6, 7, and 8, science is a single grade tested subject just at grade 8. So if you take a look at the total possible points for science, it's 22.5, and then you see the total possible points for all the other subjects, and again, more than 1 grade level combined for a total of 92.5. Another note that I'm not showing in the data here, the promotion and attendance for all of our schools is very strong in the high 90s. And so we get, of the 10 points, we get pretty close to full credit of 10 points because our promotion rate and our attendance data is very strong. It should also be noted that that data that you see in there is not 13-14, it's actually 12-13. So all the achievement data is for the last year, attendance and promotion is for the year prior to that. And that has to do with the timelines for reporting. So these are the 2 scores for our middle schools. West represents an increase at 91.4 and Southern a decrease to 83.5. Now getting into specifically in looking at the reading achievement for each building, the cumulative reading achievement. So in this case here for the elementary schools, it's grades 3 through 5. For the middle schools, it's grades 6 through 8. The color coding, if you see blue, it's an increase from the year prior, and what you see in parentheses is the number that they were at last year. So the blue is a quick visual to show you that's an increase from the year prior. A red is a visual to show you that's a decrease from the year prior. And a green fluorescent is to represent that it's kind of stayed the same year over year. One thing I want you to notice as we go through the reading, math, science, and writing, there are basically 28 reporting topics. So there's seven per slide. And look at the number of blue achievement, which represents an increase relative to red. So in this case, you can see our achievement data with science at our different buildings that you'll find then on the SPP site. This is math. This is science. For the elementary school, again, it's grade 4 only. For the 2 middle schools, grade 8 only. For writing, in the elementary schools, it's grade 5 only. In the middle schools, grade 8 only. So going through that again, real quick, just from a visual standpoint, using the colors, of the 28 lines, or the 28 items, achievement items, 8 of the 28 are a decrease. All the rest are either the same year over year or an increase. So representing more significantly improvement in our academic achievement. That may not always show up when you look at earlier the slide that had some decreases in our school performance profile scores at our different buildings. And again, then what's factored in there are the pieces with growth as well as closing the achievement gap. So closing the achievement gap, just for science, had to be closed based on what the baseline year was for 2012, 2013. And I'll explain it real quick again. It was the idea that if your baseline score in science was 60% proficient or advanced, the goal is 100. Therefore, the gap is 40 points. School Performance Profile says, or PDE, you have to close that gap by half in 6 years. And you have to demonstrate incrementally each year that you're closing that gap. So if the overall gap is 40, half of that is 20, and then divided by 6 would establish what you have to do each year to get full credit. If you did not close the gap, you got a 0. So in this is certainly a conversation about the power of 0 in terms of looking at how, even though it's 2.5, you might have, and I'll show you this, well, going back to this achievement, you have scores, looking at Cornwall Terrace and Green Valley as 2 examples, their baseline data year was 93 and 94. That was their baseline data. Why 2012, 2013 was selected as the baseline year for science, I do not know. But it is. And so when you have some very high performance, we have, so if I looked at, I think it was Green Valley, I was just looking at it a little while ago, their incremental is 0.4 each year. That's what they have to do every year for 6 years. Keep in mind that the class size changes. It's not the same group of kids. So you could have a grade 4 that's 91 year and a grade 4 that's 75 the next year, a grade 4 that's 80. And so we know, that's certainly a variable in there. The 0.4 amounted to 1 student. Okay. So that's when you look at the incremental, it really comes down to keeping your same performance and increasing that by 1 year, or 1 student in many cases. But you also see some very strong performance, of schools that had baseline data in the 90s and improved year over year on that.
So spring break already accomplished what is necessary.
Yes, but if they, in this case here, they were at 90, they needed to go 5 points in 6 years. If they were to, so they get the bank, okay? So they definitely exceeded what they had to do. They get to, get credit for 1 year's worth. They can cash in on that and then put in reserve the other points. If they slide back considerably the next year, then they got to cash in those points. But yeah, you can bank prior year's progress. So these were our 8 schools, and we'll get to high school a little bit later, but these were the schools that, yes, were able to close the achievement gap, or no, we're not, within science only. And therefore, the yeses were able to receive the full 2.5 points, and the schools on the right received a 0 within their school performance profile. So looking at the high school, we showed you middle school and elementary. Looking just at high school has a total possible points of 75. Now, I would say that high school, I feel, is made up of a much more robust menu of pieces that go into it. Elementary and middle, it's all PSSA. That's the only test. It's used multiple times for not only achievement, but also growth. But it's essentially the PSSA. Where in high school, yes, it's Keystone exams, but it's also SAT, advanced placement, NOCTI exams, PSAT. So there's a lot of other measures that's put into a high school that I think, for speaking from a high school perspective, makes up more of a better picture of the work of a high school. It captures that work. But in this case here, compared to the elementary schools and middle, it's only worth total possible points of 75. with extra credit up to 6, which I'll show you in a minute. So I want to pause, as I said, for a quick recap. Elementary and middle, 92.5 total possible points. PSSA, academic achievement and growth. Keystone Algebra 1, growth only, not achievement. So the scores that I showed you earlier of students at grades 7 and 8, those proficient and advanced scores get banked and don't get cashed in until the students complete their junior year, at which point that academic achievement credit goes to the high school, not the middle schools. Okay. For high school, it's 75, and also those students taking the PSSA take it one time only. That's it, grade 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. In Keystones, we get to use the best score from the last attempt that they've taken by their junior year. So if a student is not proficient or advanced, we remediate, they may take that test again. If they score proficient or advanced, even if it's on the third time, we get that best score, and that gets added to our overall proficient and advanced percentage. We also have included there, as I said earlier, NOCTI, which is the industry competency-based assessments that are given to our students at BCTC. Our BCTC students do very well in their end of program exams, and the credit for that gets put to our high school. And then SAT, PSAT, ACT, and PLAN, and our advanced placement performance, not only in the offerings that we have, but in how strong our performance is in students scoring a 3 or higher, especially considering the significant increase in enrollment that we've experienced in our advanced placement courses. So going into high school, this is just a quick breakdown of the points. See the 3 Keystone exams at 7.5 each, NOCTI at 5. SAT college, SAT and ACT college ready benchmark. That's an SAT students that graduate grade 12, so our last year's class of 2014, scoring 1550 or higher, and in the ACT or the ACT 22 or higher. And you'll see in a minute that we got 100 full points because of how well our students did on either one of those exams. And that's, again, the credit then gets to the high school when the best test that those students have taken by the end of their senior year. Closing the achievement gap. Now this one I don't really have an answer for. It made sense when we were told that for PSSA reasons, with the test in math and reading being new this year, that we would use this year then as the baseline. But I didn't get an explanation as to why for Keystone Algebra 1 and Keystone Literature, because those assessments are really pretty much staying the same. So why they chose to pull those tests from the Closing the Achievement Gap, I don't really have an explanation for. So for the high school, again, similar to the other schools, it's just for Keystone Biology. In this case here, we did not close the gap for the all student groups or the historical underperforming. In fact, I think our performance was the same. So we needed to increase by, I think, a couple percentage points. So. And then PVAS growth, keep in mind here, look at the achievement for these exams, 7.5. The growth weight is 10. So in this formula, growth counts more than achievement. And in our high school, we received really positive results within the growth that our students experienced on these 3 exams. Even if they do not pass the exam, there is still growth being reported. So if a student goes from below basic to basic, that's growth, and it is reported as growth, even though the student may not have yet passed their attain a proficient score. Similar to elementary and middle, with the Closing the Achievement Gap, the biology exam is the one that holds the most weight at 20 possible points in this formula. So you see a theme in the elementary, middle, and high school that science, as that one content area for 1 year, has significant weight within the school performance profile. Some other pieces, graduation rate and attendance rate from 12-13 or 2.5. Advanced placement, This is if you offer and have enrollment within a course in each of the 4 main core content areas. And we have a very robust, healthy, successful advanced placement program. So not only do we get credit for the offering and the enrollment, but I have a note here that you'll see later that we had an award for the number of 12th graders. So last year's class of 2014 and the percent of students that were at a 3 or higher on at least one AP exam. Look at year over year, 87% in 13-14 compared to 67 in the prior year. Enrollment difference, George, can I put you on the spot on that one real quick? 12-13 enrollment was?
About 100 students more.
100 students more. So not only did we go up 100 more students in enrollment, but we increased that test performance, which is truly something to remark. So that's our high school building score, 94.2. To change from 95.2 the year prior, 1 point, not real significant, but still has a very, very healthy, very positive performance score going into from 13-14. Here are some numbers real quick that you'll see on the school performance profile site that are given to the high school for that score. Now you'll see earlier I showed you some numbers that don't match these because these numbers are the cumulative scores of students taking the exam at any point prior to them completing their junior year. So scores that were banked in 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, or 11th grade. So in each of those different grades, the kid gets proficient and they're not in 11th grade, we bank it until you complete the junior year. And so that's what the number is that's on the school performance profile site. So again, you see strong performance across our 3 keystone areas, and then in our NOCTI and SAT College Ready benchmark, improvement from the year prior, receiving it's 100. It's not 100 points, but it's 100% for that point total. Then we receive full credit, so it's 10 possible points for each of the PVAS category, numbers, and we received a 10 out of 10 for the students' growth within PVAS on those 3 keystone exams. Here's the other academic indicators showing in graduation and attendance an improvement in the 12-13 year, 1 percentage point increase each. And then the advanced placement and PSAT participation going from 60% year prior to 100, and that's certainly looking at that as an important function of getting kids college and career ready, and we provide that for students during the school day, just recently too. This is our extra credit for the high school, and shows you the advanced performance credit that we received in Keystone, NOCTI, and then what I wanted to point out, as mentioned earlier, the extra credit received for advanced placement performance. So just in summary, just some patterns and trends that I see when looking at the data. I said earlier, I find myself that every time I go in and look at the data, I come out with more questions than answers, and has me continuing to explore further. But some things that I see spending some time over the last few months is that we see a continued trend of strong academic achievement on our various tests. And so where you might have seen a decrease from one year to the next was really not that statistically significant, but overall, when I look at relative to the state and to surrounding school districts, we continue to perform very well. Another piece to point out is in our advanced performance. We have a significant population of students that score, our staff and students are working very hard to score in that advanced level, which is quite a challenge on these PSSA and these Keystone exams. And so it's something there too to be applauded, but it's also a challenge for us when it comes to growth. Because while in our achievement we have students that are scoring advanced, and in some cases staying advanced, they may be moving in that scale within advanced. And so on one hand, we have very high performance of students, a percentage of students that are scoring advanced, but sometimes we look at our PVAS data where we're seeing the lack of growth is in the advanced area. So it's a challenge for our district to continually moving forward. There was no, when I look across the different buildings, there wasn't any one content area where I could say that, yep, across our buildings, it's science, or it's math, or it's reading. Each building had its own unique pieces that had an effect on their score. So there wasn't any broad generalization that I could make across the district from an overview sense that would drive any real serious deliberation on something that we're not doing across the district. But nonetheless, it was more of looking within that building to study those students and what was occurring within that year to understand why the score was the way it was. And lastly, showing you the PVAS weighting, the more that we study it, recognizing that the PVAS model has significant weight to the new school performance profile formula. The one trend, as I mentioned earlier, that we do see prevalent across our district and the state, that's an important piece too, across the state as well, is students that are in that advanced category that are not showing the growth as they were predicted to do, that then has an adverse effect. But it's not content specific either. It's not in any one content only. It does kind of go across the different content areas and some of the different buildings. So with that, sort of a segue. So those assessed the school performance profile, the achievement results were based on legacy standards. So an old set of academic standards that we've been operating under for many years, PSSA that we've become very familiar with over the years, and as you can see from our achievement, have done very well in. And so this year, we're being introduced to the PA core standards and what those assessments look like, and we talked a little bit about that, if you recall, at a prior board conversation. So with that, the timing is good in terms of us renewing our comprehensive plan for the 2014-2017 school year. And to quickly summarize what I think are the most important pieces to come out of the plan was, first and foremost, working together, a group of community stakeholders that included Dr. Chmielewski, Ms. Carol Reed, different parents, Dr. Ruth, myself, other administrators, Kate, George, Kyle, Matt Flannery, I'm trying to think, looking around real quick at some others, Veronica, Andes, then some teachers across our district, met a number of times throughout last year, took a look at our mission statement, looked at what was in front of us, in front of our students, and came up with the mission statement that you see in front of you, empowering our students to create their own future. Emphasis on empowering, emphasis on our students, making reference to students within the mission statement. Important element of create. We felt it was very important that we really take a look at what we're doing in our instruction, in our classrooms, to get students to be creating their learning. And then I kind of see this as a double play on words, talking about their own future. So this idea of creating their own future. I also like to pull out the own, that they own it. Thinking about empowering, that they own it, that they are invested, they feel they have control, that they have power within creating that future. So that's our mission statement that we're recommending within our new comprehensive plan. From there, we had to then explore three main areas: academic systems, stewardship. Stewardship mainly had to do with our professional staff, those human resources that we have within the district, and what are we doing to make sure they're performing at their very best. And then the third one was safe and supportive schools. Within each area, then, we had to identify a goal and then action steps to achieve that goal. So the first one, for academic systems, the goal of the Wilson School District is to create an accessible, uniform, written curriculum for all stakeholders in all grade levels and content areas that will be part of a regular, ongoing process of review and improvement. To accomplish that, one, obviously, create a well-written curriculum, create a common assessment program throughout our district, which was represented today by over 25 various staff members at the BCIU for session 1 of 3 on assessments with the Common Core standards led by Jay McTighe. And third, creating a comprehensive professional development program. which you'll also see mentioned within the stewardship goal. In the stewardship area, the goal of the Wilson School District was to create a comprehensive system throughout the district that fully ensures professional development is based on the needs of all professional employees. Recognizing that sometimes our professional development might be geared to just to the classroom teacher and not be mindful of all the various professionals that we have serving our students and what needs they have for their professional learning. To accomplish this goal, first is to develop and implement a needs assessment protocol to get an idea of what do our various professional staff need for their development and learning. Second was, from that information, develop a 3-year long-range professional development plan. Third was to then develop a comprehensive mentoring program, which this year the board supported in the mentoring program that we've established with some teacher leaders that we have in our district. Fourth, use an evaluation protocol to measure the effectiveness of professional development. And this was a change from how we might have measured professional development in the past. We might have done professional development in the past, and everybody got their exit slip with the 4 questions on a Likert scale. Did you find the content to be relevant? Did you find the presenters to be engaging? And the evaluation had everything to do with the session itself and not whether the learning that was gained from it really had any effectiveness in application when the teachers left and were then using it within their classroom. So there's certainly a lot more literature coming out and a lot more work that we need to do to say, how do we evaluate? So when we have a professional development day and we're doing a session on inquiry, how are we then evaluating the effect of that program in terms of whether or not students' teaching and learning is improved as a result? And lastly, work to create a culture of customized and personalized professional learning. Again, the idea that the culture has to change, that it's not the district's responsibility alone to develop you as a professional. That as a professional, we need to embrace our development first and then seek out the various resources that exist to meet those needs. Yes, the district needs to be a key provider of that, but we also wanted the professional to look at other avenues, other resources outside the district that could meet the need that they have in their learning. Lastly, in safe and supportive schools, the goal of the Wilson School District is to create and implement a multi-tiered systems of support for all students. And to do that, we work to use a universal screening protocol for academic, behavioral, and emotional barriers to learning, implement an evidence-based intervention program, monitor the ongoing student progress in response to those implemented interventions, engage in systematic database decision-making about services needed for students based on specific outcomes, prevention and wellness promotion, and lastly, identify and address the needs of the disenfranchised student. So that's a real quick presenting the main goals and the action steps along with the mission statement that drove this work. And it's on your agenda. It was given to you a paper copy back in September and is on the agenda for recommendation for approval tonight. So a little bit of some nodding, try to go as fast as I could, with hopefully building the understanding that you were hoping to gain from the presentation. So, any questions or comments?
Thanks, Steve. Very
Okay.
nice.
Thanks.